the thing is, having a lot of followers doesn't necessarily mean that you make good money. I don't make a lot of money right now. I make enough to get by.
Have you considered just getting a full-time job and like leaving the self-employed life behind you? Or what would make you want to do that? But, hey everyone, today I am talking with Florian, better known as Coding in Flow. I'm sure many of you have seen his tutorials on YouTube, and he's also pretty active on Instagram and Twitter. But he has been in the YouTube game for a long time, and he's one of the most popular and highest quality Android YouTubers out there. So I'm really excited to talk to him about his journey, how he got into computer science and coding, and also how he got into YouTube. So Florian, thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, thanks for the nice compliments.
Yeah. So I actually wanted to start out with, I know that you didn't study computer science in college. You actually did economics. And then it was a few years after you graduated that you decided that you wanted to start doing programming. So I'm curious, what led to you making that decision?
Yeah, so as I said, as you already said, I studied business economics, and this was a complete waste of time for me. I studied this because I didn't know what I should do with my life. I had no ambition at all. Somehow my brain was not developed fully at my early 20s, apparently, because I had no ambition. I was just lazy as hell, and this suddenly changed at around 24. I don't know why. Maybe my brain finished its development. But at this time, I started to become more ambitious, more goal-oriented. And yeah, the thing is, I don't like to talk too much about what I did after my business economics degree, because I actually did not have a normal job after that. I had some experiments with something that was also more into the self-employed route, so I did something myself. I don't like to explicitly say what this was. It was not illegal, but it's just something you don't want to broadcast out to many people. So it was not illegal. It was also not something from the adult movie industry or something like that. It's just a little bit awkward. But I started hating doing this thing I did before. And then at 26, so 1 month before I turned 27, I sat down. I had a little bit of a breakdown, I would say. I knew that I didn't want to do what I did before anymore. I also knew that I didn't want to do anything with my business economics degree. So what I did was I sat down for like a day or two and didn't really do anything else besides just thinking about what do I want to do in my future. What is the kind of work that I'm willing to do basically every day for years on end without hating my life? So what is my passion basically? And then I went through everything in my head. I even considered stuff like making music, anything. I just wanted to know if I'm interested in this and if this would be something that I would be willing to do for a while. And then I remember that I really enjoyed learning programming as a kid. And also, so I started learning programming as a kid at around 12, I think. I don't know how old I was exactly, but I lost track of that because when I turned 13, 14, it was more important for me to be considered cool with the other kids, and being a nerd was not really an option for me because I was too insecure to really stand for being a nerd. I was a nerd internally, but I was too insecure to actually live that out and show that. So I lost track of this interest, unfortunately, and today I really regret this, but this is how my life went. But then when we had programming classes in high school again, when I was around 16 or 17, I think, then I immediately enjoyed it again. And it came relatively easy to me, actually, compared to the other kids in my class. So this was my second experience with programming. But then again, I completely lost track of that. I didn't pursue it in any way. But at 26, I remembered that I used to like learning programming. And then I started learning from scratch again, basically. And I also started my YouTube channel, I think 3 months after I started learning to code. And I basically made videos about the stuff I learned. And this is how I built the Coding in Flow channel. And this is how I taught myself programming.
The one thing that's unique about your journey into, like, as you got reintroduced into the world of programming at age 26, 27, is that you very quickly started a YouTube channel. So what was the reasoning behind that?
I Googled things like, can I get a job when I start learning at 27? I Googled stuff like that. If I'm too old, basically, I wanted to know that. And especially when you search for German results on that, they tend to be a bit negative on the site. They say maybe, yeah, you are too old, or it will take very long until you get a job. And I think I just intuitively understood that there's also this option to actively build my personal brand, and this would help me in some way. And I had this idea that I could just put out content and this way basically make a name for myself. So this is what you would call personal branding, basically. This is why people create these YouTube channels. But it's not like someone explained to me that it works like that. It just made sense to me that this is a way to put myself out there. So this was basically why I started this channel, to create a personal brand, to make myself known. And of course, I also had this hope in my head that I could maybe make money from the channel. But at this time, again, if I would have asked in a community somewhere if I can make money from starting a programming YouTube channel as a beginner, then everyone would have said no. So I couldn't really listen to that. I just did it and hoped that it works out in some way. And I really quickly made some ad revenue on the side. And this way I really killed multiple birds with one stone. By teaching programming concepts, I made sure that I understand them correctly, because teaching, as we already figured out in the previous recording we did on my podcast, teaching is basically the best way to learn something, because you really realize where you have knowledge gaps. And then I also made some ad revenue on the side, and I built this personal brand. So it just made sense to me that creating YouTube videos, I can only win from that. And this is also how it worked out. So yeah, this is why I started this channel pretty early.
Yeah, I love that notion of what you're describing with repackaging. So you do one thing and you actually are able to achieve multiple things as a result of that. Like in your case, you were able to teach, which was a way of learning. You're able to get your name out there, and you were able to make some amount of money. And the same thing, I love that idea. Like, I'm teaching the class at Stanford now about Android. So I'll make a YouTube video and then I'll repurpose that as a part of the class I'm teaching. So like this idea of repackaging stuff or double dipping is something that is super powerful, because then you get multiple benefits from the same input that you do.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So then one thing that like when I was starting on YouTube, one motivation for me was I feel like I could do better than a lot of the other content. I actually distinctly remember watching some of your content, and I remember thinking, this person is actually making really high quality stuff. But a lot of the other content out there was like, I feel like I could do better. I'm curious if that played a role for you at all. Like, did you feel like there was some gap in the existing content on YouTube or on blogs or elsewhere on the web, and you felt like you could explain things in a better way? Or was it mostly about, I just want to do it for myself and learning?
Yeah, I think I didn't really pay too much attention to that. At the time I started, Slide Nerd was around, for example. He was around and he did pretty high quality content in my opinion. But there was also a lot of low quality content. But I don't think that I specifically thought that I could do it better. No, I think this was not really a thought in my head at this time.
Got it. Okay. One thing I want to touch on is you had a video about the best way to learn something is by tinkering and by teaching, like what we talked about just now. So I'm curious, because you are self-employed, you don't have the structure necessarily around you with coworkers or an office in order to figure out when to work, how many hours at a time. When you're like preparing a YouTube video or when you're preparing something for teaching, right? How do you create that structure? Like, do you have a routine every day?
Yeah, I now have one. I've experimented with so many different ways to stay productive. It's really difficult when you're self-employed. It's so hard. And also my mother, now that he's in a home office because of COVID, on some days she has really problems being any productive at all. It's difficult. What I do right now and what works best for me is having a real schedule in my day. So I woke up in the morning, same time every day, and I need the structure, even if I'm self-employed, because otherwise it's so easy to slack off and not really be any productive at all.
Okay, so could you tell me more about that schedule? Like, is it a standard like working day where you wake up at a certain time, work for 8 hours, and you take off, or is it much more up to you how you structure it?
Yeah, I would say in a normal company you basically have to work your 8 hours in one package, basically, with a break between. Of course, I try to divide it more intelligently just because I can. So I usually work 5 hours in the morning, and this is before I eat my first meal. Then I eat, then I work a little bit more, then I go to sports on most days of the week. And I mean, normally it would be more healthy to just call it a day after that and relax, but I also try to get a little bit of work in the later evening, which is usually just answering comments and going through emails and stuff like that. So lightweight work. And my approach is that I also work on the weekends, but the benefit is that if a friend calls me on Monday morning and says, hey, can you come here because we do this and that, we want to go out, we want to go visit something, then I can just spontaneously go with them and just not work on this Monday morning, for example. So my approach is to work if I'm at home and if I have the time, and then take really take real breaks. I try to not just take a break because I'm lazy and want to watch dumb YouTube videos. I try to take breaks that really that are real breaks, where I meet with people or where I do something that I really enjoy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. I love that approach to actually disconnecting and being able to do something which is not just passive consumption of Twitter or YouTube, because those often will make you feel more drained than relaxed. I'm curious, have you considered just getting a full-time job and like leaving the self-employed life behind you? Or what would make you want to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting, but the main problem is that I live in Germany and there are not so many opportunities here. And I also would really like to stay in the city I'm currently at. It's a smaller city in Germany, or not that small. I think we have like 200K population. And I would like to stay here because my family is close, and I already spent a few years living in Austria, where I don't see my family often. So I don't want to move to the US, basically. That's my main problem. And all the interesting opportunities are in the US, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. So
yes, so I would consider doing a real job if I lived in the US, but here in Germany it's a bit more difficult because there are no real interesting opportunities around here.
Is it hard to get like a remote opportunity where you work for an American company or a London-based company, but you're a remote engineer?
Yeah, I haven't really looked into that too much, but from what I see, a lot of these US companies that offer remote work, they still want you to live in the US, right? Remote often for them means you still have to live in the US because of time zones and taxes and stuff like that.
I think that's mostly true, but I definitely know of a handful of cases where people are able to go remote and they live in Australia or Europe somewhere. So I think it's definitely possible. If that's something that's interesting to you, it may be worth looking into.
Yeah, but now I grew to a size, so my channel grew to a size where some opportunities are opening up. So I first want to explore these opportunities.
Yeah.
Like I created a course a while ago, but making courses is not so really something I like. It's just work that it's really stressful, and of course work can't always be fun, but I really don't enjoy making courses. It feels pretty bad. Also because I tend to be really perfectionist when it comes to this stuff, and then making a 10-hour course turns into a really really hard task. But for example, I experiment with doing my podcast now, and then for the first time I did sponsorships, so I get paid for doing shout outs, and those are opportunities I didn't really use in the past, but now they are opening up and I want to explore them. This is why getting a full-time job is not really so interesting right now. Maybe later.
Yeah, no, I think that where you are in terms of your YouTube journey is really interesting because you clearly have a pretty massive following of people who know you and trust you. And there's a ton of things that will open up as a result of that. So that's actually a perfect segue. I wanted to ask you, how do you think about success as a YouTuber? Because I think there's so many options available to you, right? Like you have one paid course, which I'll link down below in the description if people are interested. Obviously, you're making some money from YouTube ad revenue. You mentioned you just have a sponsor. Like, what is a metric? Like, is it number of subscribers or just ad revenue or paid courses? Like, what do you look at every day to figure out if you're succeeding?
Yeah, the thing is, having a lot of followers doesn't necessarily mean that you make good money. I don't make a lot of money right now. I make enough to get by, but I know other people that are more successful with that. So Philip Luckner, who you know, for example, he has really figured it out. He has less subscribers than me on YouTube, but he has really figured out how to create courses efficiently. And I really admire him for that because he is able to make a good living from that. And I think he will be very successful in the future. But I think it's more important. How many followers you have is actually not that important. Once you have like a few thousand subscribers, I think this is enough to make good money from that. If you figure out how to efficiently create paid content, basically. This is the difficult part for me to create courses because, as I already said, it's work that I really don't like. But yeah, this is basically the point. The number of followers doesn't matter so much. It matters more how good you are with creating paid content or monetizing your content in some other way.
Yeah, that's interesting. So when you think about the monetization opportunity, it sounds like paid courses are pretty painful for you, but how do you think about sponsorships versus maybe other like merchant? I don't know what other avenues you have available to you, but like which one are you kind of leaning into in the next couple of months or couple of years?
For now, sponsorship seems the most interesting because this way you can do whatever content you want, basically, as long as people watch it. And you can get paid by doing a shout out for a company. Of course, you should only do that for products you actually you can actually stand behind and you actually like, and that actually is actually good for your followership. This seems to be the most interesting right now. I've tried merchandise on YouTube, but this does not work at all. Programmers don't want to buy a programmer YouTube channel merchandise unless you have built some really cool brand. Yeah, so, but I know that I would make the most money by making courses. This is when you have a YouTube channel where you create tutorials, and making courses is just the best way to make money. And I know other programming YouTubers who make I have one guy in my mind from which I know that he made more than $500,000 from a single course launch. So you can really make a ton of money by creating courses if you are good at it. But if you hate this work, then there is no point in doing that because I don't want to wake up and hate my life every day. So at the moment, yeah, sponsorship seems to be the most interesting because this way I can basically create the content I want, which right now is podcasts because they are the most fun for me.
Yeah, I like how I feel like you have a very disciplined way of looking at the benefit, but also how much do you enjoy it? And it seems like you have a very structured way of thinking about that, which I think is really cool. One of the things that appealed to me about YouTube is that it's not just teaching. There's actually a lot that goes into it. For example, video editing, creating a compelling thumbnail. How do you, do community management, reply to people in the comments? I'm curious, how did you think about that? Like, is that something that do you enjoy the meta work of putting stuff on YouTube, or is that just stuff that you kind of tolerate?
No, I had really problems with this in the past because what happens to me is that I have perfectionist tendencies And then it can easily happen that you put too much effort into the wrong stuff. And this happened to me, and there was a point where I needed like more than a week to create a single 10-minute video, and this was not efficient at all. And this is something I have trouble with finding the right balance between creating content fast to be able to put out new videos regularly and putting effort into this meta stuff, like creating good thumbnails. And I really had to experiment with this. How much effort do I put into this stuff? Because is it better to create 2 videos in a week, but with really nice thumbnails and tags and great metadata? Or is it better to put less effort into that and less time, but create 3 videos? This was really, I'm still not sure how this works best, but this is something that's definitely not easy for me. I think the best way is just to always think about how much does it make sense to put more time and effort into this. You can basically use there's this thing called Pareto principle, that in many things 20% of the input brings 80% of the results, right? So this is something you can keep in mind. Just focus on the stuff that really moves the needle, but don't go overboard. This is basically what I would say. I'm just thinking about if I can find an example for that. It makes sense to put proper tags on your videos. It makes sense to think about a good title, good description. It makes sense to make one thing I would not put too much effort in is video editing, especially in a programming tutorial. Because when people watch a programming tutorial, they don't care about special effects. They don't care about nice animations and stuff like that. Maybe prepare some slides if you want to explain something. Make sure you prepare the code beforehand so you can explain it properly without having large gaps or interruptions in it. But don't go overboard and create really elaborate animations or special effects, because people don't care about this stuff when it comes to tutorials. This is one example where you can find ways to be more efficient.
How do you think about delegation? Have you ever thought about like hiring a freelance designer or an editor, and you can just basically outsource that part of the job of being a YouTuber to them, and you can just focus on actually, filming and recording? Do you think, how do you think about that, and when do you think you might do that?
Yeah, this is definitely a weakness of mine. First of all, at the moment, I can't afford it, so it doesn't really play a role yet. There's not enough money I make from a single video that would make sense to hire someone that edits it, because then I would pay more money to create this video than I can make from it. Maybe when the video is sponsored, then it can work. But one problem I have with this, I really have trust issues when it comes to that. I think that someone, if I don't cut and I know that many people think like that when they haven't yet delegated any work, they tend to think that they can do all the stuff like no one else can do. They can do it better than anyone else. But also the problem is when I create when I create a tutorial or a paid course, then I often find little mistakes here and there while I am editing the tutorial. So the editing process is still a moment where I fix stuff. And when I outsource this and someone else edits the video, then I would miss that. So at the moment, I can't really imagine outsourcing tutorials, even though I probably should. But I could imagine outsourcing a podcast, because a podcast it doesn't contain so many specific details that someone has to know.
Yeah, I think that the way you phrased it makes a ton of sense. It's like when you make a tutorial, especially something that's technical and you have intimate familiarity with, I think it becomes like your baby. And it's very hard to outsource parts of taking care of that baby to someone else. So I can understand that. And it's definitely a challenge. But it is something like, if you think about broader impact on the world, probably you're going to have a lot more impact if you can publish like 1 video a day. I mean, that's probably not feasible. But then, you're probably going to reach a lot more people and help more people. So you have to balance that with the fact that, maybe the quality will not be as high as your previous videos or as high as you would like it to be. So it is a really tricky decision to figure out where you want to live on that spectrum.
Yeah, and it's something I have to get over eventually, because, as you say, it just makes more sense to create more content and don't be so nitpicky, if that's the right word, to or to not be too perfectionist with the single video itself, because editing videos and doing all the stuff takes a lot of time, and I could create more content if I would outsource that. So I have to get over this. But I also think it makes sense to not outsource something like that right away. So if you start a YouTube channel, even if you have the money, don't outsource editing right from the beginning, because you need to get a feeling for the editing process. You should do it yourself a while, just so you know how it works, what someone has to pay attention to. You can explain to a video editor how you want it and what he has to pay attention to, basically, because you know the process. So yeah, I would not outsource it right away, but eventually it makes sense if you create content regularly.
Yeah. One question that came from Twitter was someone was asking, do you think that this passive income do you think generating passive income, that field is saturated, or is it still possible? And I guess let me caveat this by saying I don't think it's passive income. Like the work that you're doing, once you make a video, yeah, you might be getting some ad revenue from it even months from now, but it's a ton of work as a content creator to continue to churn out content. So I do think that the passive income, that framing is maybe slightly incorrect, but let me rephrase the question. Do you think that it's possible today for someone new to come into YouTube or, content creation, like writing a blog, and make a meaningful amount of money off of it? Or do you think at this point there's too many people to compete with?
No, I think it's totally possible. And I think it's not much different from 2 years ago, no, 3 or 4 years ago when I started. Yeah, I started 2017. I don't think it's much different. We are still in the we are actually still in the early phases of the internet, basically. The internet is still pretty new. So this is not dead at all yet. There is enough room. There are so many requests for tutorials that people ask me that I can't fulfill, even if I would make tutorials and nothing else all day. There's a lot of opportunity to do this. It's just difficult, but it's not too late to start a YouTube channel or make passive income from that. But as you said, it's not really that passive because the programming landscape is changing fast. So if you create a tutorial, then it won't be so relevant a few years into the future anymore because it will be outdated. But I have tutorials that are 4 years old that people are still watching. So my most profitable YouTube video in terms of ad revenue is one of the very first videos I made. It's a 2.5-minute video on how to open an activity on Android with an intent. And it made more than $1,000 in ad revenue, this one single video. And people are still watching this. It's in Java, so it's actually pretty outdated. But yeah, the point is that, as said, it's not really passive income, but you can still get into it, and there's enough opportunity here for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are two things, right? One is that the world of Android is changing so rapidly that if you come in now, you can actually try and make a tutorial or teach something in a way which is more modern, and that could have an audience. So there's always opportunity there. And the second thing is that I think you're a good example of this, which is that you don't need to be coding for 10 years or even 5 years to create something of value, right? Like people learn in different styles, and people like to learn from different types of teaching. And so I think there's always an opportunity to come in with whatever level of experience you have and put yourself out there and teach. And I think it can only help people. So I think that
but you have to create.
I agree with
you have to create. Yeah, you have to create good content. That's the point. And many people that start to create content are just lazy. They basically read the documentation and then they basically just copy the exact same stuff. Yeah. And there are many YouTube channels that don't take off ever. But if you put effort into trying to become good at making tutorials, then there's a lot of opportunities still.
Yeah. That's a very important point. You have to actually have something which people get value from. And I think I've learned this certainly. Making tutorials is very deep. There's a ton of thinking and planning that goes into making a high quality tutorial. And if you can master that, I think there's a lot of value for you and, of course, the people who are watching. So I think my last question actually is around your plan, how you think about the future. So if you were to fast forward 2 years and everything that you dreamed of was fulfilled, what does your life look like in 2023?
Yeah, I would have a girlfriend, definitely. Maybe even a wife. But yeah, jokes aside, my dream was always to have my own tech startup, basically. This is what I imagine in my head, that I'm working on my own app. But I know that if this was really my life, then it would probably be much less fun than I expected. Because even if you only have a small app, there are a lot of stuff you have to do when you work on that app that are not really that much fun. And the grass is always greener on the other side. This is something I realized. So no matter what you do, something else always seems more interesting. So I'm actually pretty content with what I do right now. So I could imagine that I do what I do right now, which is making these podcasts on YouTube, which I do mainly at the moment, making money through sponsorships, basically, and working on my own apps on the side. And it would be really cool if I could make some money through my own apps on the Play Store, but I don't know if that's realistic in this day and age to be a solo developer with a successful app. But it's fun for me, and it's a way for me to learn new stuff and stay motivated with learning new stuff. Of course, what people really want to see from me are tutorials and courses. But to be honest, I'm a little bit burnt out of creating tutorials and courses. I've done it for a while, and as I already said, I don't like the process too much, so I want to experiment with some other stuff. So yeah, the best thing for me would basically be finding some more sponsorships that pay me for creating podcasts, basically.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. Okay, I think you have a very healthy perspective that a lot of people want to have this transformational life. But yeah, usually once you do the thing that you dream about, you figure out that there's a lot of issues with that. So I think that your perspective is actually really healthy, that, you're actually largely content with what you're doing. And it's pretty cool that, if you continue to do the same thing, then you would actually be very happy. So I feel like that's a very good indication that, you found something that you really enjoy. And I think the whole developer community in the Android world is benefiting from that. So I'm definitely a fan of you continuing on.
Yeah, thank you.
So that was everything I had on my end. Thanks a lot, Florian, for coming on and chatting. Is there anything else that you want to point people to or mention before we end?
Yeah, people can just check out my YouTube channel, Coding in Flow, and from there they will find my other accounts. On every social media platform, I'm called Coding in Flow, basically, and it's always the platform URL, like facebook.com/ and then Coding in Flow in lowercase and one word, Coding in Flow. That's my nickname on all these platforms. And I really want to grow on TikTok at the moment. I'm pretty new on TikTok. I thought it's supposed to be easy to grow there, but I have like 130 subscribers, and this really hurts my self-esteem. So if you live in a country where TikTok is not banned, please subscribe to my TikTok account. Yeah, that's basically it.
Okay, I'll leave links to everything, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. And I think one thing I appreciate about you is your meme game is actually quite good. A lot of the memes that you have on Instagram are super high quality. So I'll definitely leave a link to your Instagram as well.
Okay, thanks. And thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I thanks for the time. And I think that this collaboration, you coming over here and I coming onto your channel, super fun. Hopefully people enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments. And yeah, thanks a lot, Florian. I'll hope to talk to you soon.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye.